The rise before the fall. In the story of how civilizations rise and fall, there is usually a moment when the world seems to hold its breath, a moment when power, wealth, and knowledge gather in one place so brightly that it feels eternal. In the 9th century, that place was not London, it was not Paris, it was not Rome, it was Baghdad. At the center of the Islamic world stood a city so advanced, so wealthy, and so intellectually alive that travelers described it as a vision from another age. Its streets were lit by lanterns when most of Europe still slept in darkness. Its markets overflowed with silk from China, gold from Africa, and spices from India. Its libraries held more books than entire kingdoms elsewhere in the world. This was the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, an empire that stretched from the Atlantic coast of North Africa to the mountains of Central Asia. The Caliph in Baghdad ruled over millions of people, hundreds of cultures, and the most powerful economy on earth. But beneath this brilliance, something dangerous was growing. Because history has a rule. The higher a civilization climbs, the more visible it becomes to those who want to tear it down. The Abbasid caliphs made knowledge into power. Scholars from every faith and culture were invited into the house of wisdom. Ancient texts were translated, expanded, and transformed. Medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and engineering leapt forward. For a time, it seemed unstoppable, but power began to slip from the caliph's hands. Generals ruled provinces in his name. Rival dynasties rose on the edges of the empire. The center still shone, but the foundation was cracking. Far beyond the eastern horizon, another force was rising. Not an empire of books, but an empire of horses, steel, and fire. The Mongols. By the early 1200s, their armies had erased cities across Central Asia. Survivors carried stories of a force that did not conquer, it annihilated. In Baghdad, the warnings were dismissed. The caliph believed his city was untouchable. History was about to prove him wrong. The Mongol world was forged in wind and hardship. Across the vast grasslands of Central Asia, survival meant speed, discipline, and absolute loyalty. Boys learned to ride before they could walk. Warriors lived in the saddle. Every man was both soldier and scout, and above them all rose one leader who would change the world: Genghis Khan. He united the scattered tribes of the steppes into a single war machine. His law was simple: obey, and you are protected. Resist, and you are erased. The Mongol army did not move like a traditional force. It moved like a living creature. Scouts rode weeks ahead. Messengers crossed hundreds of miles in days. Generals coordinated attacks across entire regions with precision no empire had ever achieved. By the time the Mongols reached the borders of the Islamic world, entire kingdoms had already fallen. After Genghis Khan's death, his empire did not slow down. It expanded. His grandson, Hulagu Khan, was given a mission that would echo through history: march west, destroy the last great powers of the Middle East, and bring Baghdad to its knees. Hulagu did not come alone. He brought one of the largest armies the world had ever seen: Mongol cavalry, Chinese engineers, Persian allies, and siege specialists who knew how to break the strongest walls on earth. Along the way, cities were offered a choice: surrender and live, resist and vanish. Many resisted, and they were wiped from the map. By the winter of 1257, Hulagu's banners were visible on the horizon of Mesopotamia. Baghdad stood directly in his path. Inside the city, the Caliph al-Mustasim believed diplomacy would save him. He sent weak messages, he delayed. He trusted in the city's reputation more than its defenses. But reputation does not stop an army. In January 1258, the Mongols crossed the Tigris River. The siege of Baghdad began. The Mongols did not rush the walls. They surrounded the city like a tightening noose. They built siege towers. They positioned catapults. They cut supply routes. The Tigris, once Baghdad's lifeline, became a trap. Inside the city, panic spread. The Abbasid army was small, divided, and unprepared. The Caliph had no powerful allies left. The great empire that once ruled half the known world now stood alone. Mongol engineers unleashed a storm of stone and fire. Walls that had stood for centuries began to crack. After days of bombardment, the defenses collapsed. The Mongols poured into Baghdad. What followed became one of the darkest chapters in human history. For days, the city was consumed by violence. Homes, markets, and palaces were destroyed. The streets filled with smoke and screams. The greatest symbol of the city's power, the House of Wisdom, was not spared. Books were thrown into the Tigris River. So many manuscripts were dumped into the water that, according to legend, the river ran black with ink. Centuries of knowledge, science, medicine, philosophy, and history vanished in days. The Caliph was captured. Hulagu did not execute him like a common prisoner. He ordered him wrapped in a carpet and trampled by horses, so that royal blood would not touch the earth. With that act, the Abbasid Caliphate, the symbolic heart of the Islamic world, came to an end. Baghdad, once the brightest city on earth, was reduced to ruins. But the impact went far beyond one city. The fall of Baghdad sent shockwaves across continents. Trade routes collapsed. Scholars fled. Entire regions entered a long period of decline. The Islamic Golden Age, which had preserved and expanded the knowledge of the ancient world, was effectively brought to a close. But history is never simple. The Mongols, who destroyed so much, also created something new. Their empire connected east and west like never before. Goods, ideas, and technologies began flowing across thousands of miles of land under a single political system. Paper money, gunpowder, navigation techniques, and medical knowledge traveled from China to Europe. In a strange twist of fate, the same empire that burned libraries also helped spread knowledge across the world. Baghdad itself would never fully recover its former place as the center of global civilization. But its legacy survived. The mathematics taught in European universities, the medical texts used by Renaissance doctors, the astronomical charts that guided explorers across unknown seas. All of it traced back to the scholars of the Islamic Golden Age. The story of Baghdad is not just a story of destruction. It is a reminder that knowledge can build civilizations, that power can protect them, but that arrogance can leave them exposed, because even the brightest light in the world can be extinguished if it forgets how to defend itself from the dark.